Hello, welcome. Let me share my screen here and let's get started. So I'm re-recording program 4 implementation. Lucky for you, one of your students pointed out a big error that I made on the function calls. So I'm just going to go here very quickly and show you that there is an announcement posted. The function calls did have a double return type. So with the deposit money function, you pass the checking balance. The checking balance is going to get updated within the function, and then you're going to return the new updated balance. The same thing with withdrawal. Even if you do not, you pass the checking balance as by copy or by value, and then you will have an updated checking balance if money is withdrawn. So let's get started again with this assignment. So we'll go to the assignment and let's go over program 4. So I have program 4 here. Now you should have completed your algorithm before doing program 4. So we're doing a simulation of a bank. And so let's take a look at it. Again, there's a lot of assumptions. You can assume that the user is not going to put a ridiculous amount of money in the bank. This is not really about a bank. It's just more about practicing making functions, function prototypes, function definitions, calling functions, passing things to functions. And so we're just using the bank as an item for this assignment. So please use function prototypes. You have 5 programmer-defined functions. Do not change these functions. The first function greets the user. The next function runs these options 1 through 6 and -1 to quit, and then returns that result. The next function takes in a copy of the account balance, whether it's the checking or the savings, decides based on whether you pass it a C or an S, which balance to display. The deposit money, again, takes the checking or the savings, an S or a C, adds money to the account, returns the new balance. The withdrawal money has one extra feature, because if there's not enough money in the account, then you're going to have to, you're not going to be able to withdraw the money. And if you take a look at the sample output, please take a look at the sample output, because that will help you to do your algorithm. And please do not get started on your implementation until you have completed your algorithm. So let's get started on the implementation. I'm going to download the template here and launch Visual Studio. I'm going to call this program4Video. Create my project. And make this full. And project. Oops. Add new item. So I will call this, of course, you'll put your last name. I'll put my last name. Sorgente program4.c. And now I will copy make sure it's over here in my solution explorer. I can double click to make sure I'm working on the right file. I will copy and paste the template in here, and we will get started on the implementation of this program. So first, let's make sure that the template builds. So I updated the template. So now the new template has all 5 function prototypes at the top. Remember to put your name, date, and a brief description up here. A brief description does not mean function practice. A brief description would be, implementing a bank app to practice functions, something like that. That's fine. Let's take a look at the functions. We have a void function that just greets the user. We have what's called an integer function. This function will display the list of options available. Those options are 1 through 6 and -1 to quit, or is it 7 options? Let's take a look at the assignment again. So the options are 1 through 6, deposit, withdraw, display balance, and quit. So you use these functions, with, so you run these bank choices, you get the choice, and you return the number that the user enters. Then you use the display balance function. The input is a double and a character. This is going to be either the checking or the savings balance. If it's the checking balance, you're going to pass a C. If it's the savings balance, you're going to pass an S. The deposit money works the same way, only you're going to add the money and then return the result. The withdraw money works like the deposit, only you cannot withdraw money if you do not have enough in your account. All right, so let's build this template and make sure that the template works. And then we'll get started implementing one thing at a time. So you can see that I was able to compile it, but it doesn't do anything because I haven't told it to do anything. So the first thing I always like to start with is greet the user. So I do have my greeting function call here. And here is where you're going to put a nice greeting to the user. Please don't use my greeting. I just don't want you to have to sit here and watch me type. So put a much more, a better greeting than that. But now I've made some changes in my code, so I'm going to test it and make sure that that works. All right, so the greeting function is working. If I go back here, I have my function prototype for the greeting, my function call for the greeting, and then my function definition for the greeting. So the next one I want to do is I'm going to do my display balance function. So let's go down here to my function definition for my display balance. So I need to get rid of these comments. All right, so I'm going to do it for the checking account, and you're going to have to add for the savings account. So here I have my checking account. And so it's going to come in here with an account balance. The account balance, if it's the checking, is going to be that balance. And it would be a C, so it would check if it's a C. Then you do the same thing here for the savings account, only you want to check for an S. Actually, I'm going to do the whole thing here. Might as well. And of course, you want to change this to savings. Now, you could just leave this as two ifs, if it's checking, if it's savings. If you want to, you can be complete and do an else if, and then add a last else. And then I would just put a printf that says the character is not a C, or an S. You know, you're going to be actually implementing these functions, so you're really not even going to call the display balance function unless you give it an S or a C. So if you decided to do if, else if, then of course you need to have a last else. If you just wanted to, you could just do if, and then you don't even need to worry about doing the last else. This would be if it's a C, if it's an S. So now we're going to test this function. The way that we got to test this function is we need to declare our variables. So I have my checking balance. And I need to initialize my checking balance to the amount is 2. So I'm going to just copy and paste this so I have the amount. All right. So my checking balance is going to be initialized to $276. And my savings balance is going to be initialized to $124.61. All right, so I've declared my checking balance, I've declared my savings balance, and now I want to make sure that my display balance function is working as expected. All right, I should not ignore my warnings. I have a warning that says that the function run bank choices must return a value. So this function is just letting me know that this function has an integer return type and therefore it should return an integer. But I'm going to focus first on my display functions and then I will move on to that function next. So it looks like it's working. It displays my checking account balance and it displays my savings account balance. So now I've implemented my display balance function and I've called my display balance function, so I know that it works as expected. So my next function to implement is run the bank choices. So I need to declare an integer for this function, int choice, and then I need to prompt printf, enter your choice, 1 through 6, or -1 to quit. Now, this is not a good prompt. You should put a good prompt. I just don't want you to have to watch me type. So you should put a nice, good prompt, see the sample output that lists all the choices. I'm just going to, quickly type this in. Then the next thing I have to do is get the selection. So that would be a scanf. It's an integer, %d, into address of choice. And then I need to return it. Return choice. So this function, you declare the choice, you ask the user to give you the choice, you get the choice, and then you return the choice. Since choice is an integer return type, it's going to match the return type of my function. So this is my function definition. I check up here. I do have my function call, my function prototype is right up here. So now I'm just going to make sure that it works. I need to declare a variable called selection. You can name it whatever you want. You can change the variable names, of course. So I'm going to call this function run bank choices. It should jump out of this main function and into this function, ask for the choice, get the choice, and return the choice. This is an integer. So when the choice is, when it returns the choice, that will be assigned to selection. So I just used a different name in main. And then I'm going to print just to make sure that it works. So I want to make sure that my run bank choices function works, and then I will work on my loop. So I do have something here. Oops, I forgot to \n. Don't ignore. When you get warnings, you should not ignore them. That would have maybe done something weird. All right, now I test it. Enter a choice, 2. You selected 2, so it is working. I just want to add a little space here. Check it again. All right, enter 3. You selected 3, so now that is working. So the next step is to do this loop. So I'm going to get this selection. If the user enters a -1, it should not even go into this loop because it's only going to go into this loop if whatever the user enters is not -1, right? So if they entered -1, this right here, -1 does not equal -1. That is not true. So it will not go in the loop body. And that's what I want. I want -1 to stop the loop. All right. So this is the initialization for the loop. This is the test for the loop. And then I need to, of course, update in the loop. So I update by getting another selection. So again, let's make sure our loop is working as expected, and then we will continue on to our deposit money and withdraw money functions. All right, so let's test it. I entered 5, I entered 4, I entered -1, and it quits. So I know that my loop is working as expected, and then I just have to now deal with if it's a 1, if it's a 2, if it's a 3, 4, 5, or 6. And then I always like to add a last else in case they did not enter a 1 through 6. So let's so what I usually do is I would put all of my conditions here like this, and then I would add a printf to say, you know, here I would add a printf that says you selected 1 deposit to checking. Again, you don't have to do that. I just like to do it because I like to just make sure I set up my if and else all correctly. So I would just add, for the 2, for the 3, I'm just going to do the first 2. So you would add another else if for 3, for 4, for 5, for 6, right? So I selected 2, withdraw from checking, and then add the rest of the selections, which I'm not going to do here, but if they do not enter so you would have if selection is 1, deposit to checking. If selection is 2, withdraw from checking. If selection is 3, deposit to savings. If selection is 4, whatever the selections are, look at the menu and add that in yourself. And you don't have to put these printfs. This is just because I like to check and make sure everything is working as expected. So I like to give myself a lot of feedback. So if I run it and I enter a 1, deposit to check it, right? You selected 1. Select 2, withdraw. If I enter 10, it says I need to enter a 1 through 6. Obviously now if I enter 4, I also am being told that because I did not add the rest of the else ifs. You don't have to use else if. You can use switch here if you prefer, but you need to add the rest of them. So all we need to do now is implement our deposit money function and our withdraw money function. So I'm going to go down here to my function, and the deposit money is easier. So you're going to pass the account balance. It's either going to be the checking balance or the savings balance. If it's the checking balance, you're going to pass a C. See the function call right here, deposit money, checking balance, and a C. If I wanted to, let me check my choices here. Deposit to savings. So if I was going to do deposit to savings, I would add here else if selection is 3, you selected 3, deposit to savings, and then the function call would be savings balance, deposit money, and pass an S. So you're just going to reuse these functions for the savings balance and the checking balance, the deposit money. If you want to do checking, you pass your checking, it's going to give you back the updated checking. If you want to do savings, you pass it savings and an S, and it's going to do update your savings. So now let's do the deposit money function. So the deposit money function, you need to declare a variable and you need to get the amount from the user. So if you passed a C, that means it's for checking. You would display the balance. So we can reuse this display balance function, which is very nice. Again, if you're going to display the balance with checking, then you pass it a C. But you're going to notice I'm going to have an error here. The reason I have an error here is because checking balance is a local variable in the main function. So I need to use the variable that is local in this function, which makes a copy of the balance that comes in, and it's called account balance. Then I ask how much, printf, how much. You could probably give a little better prompt. And then I scan it in, scanf, %LF, use %LF with a double into add amount. Then I take the account balance that I previously had and add the amount to it. All right. So here I display the balance. I ask how much they want to add. I take the amount that they want to add. I add it to the account balance and assign that new balance. So I'm just updating. So if the account balance was 10 and they wanted to add 20, the new balance would then be 30. And then I can display it. So you need to add the conditions also for the, you need to add for the savings. And then I like to put a last else that just says there's not a C or an S, but you don't have to do that. You can do it like the other function and just use ifs, and that would work as well. If you use the, at the end, I'm going to return the new balance. So if the account balance came in as $30, I added 20, the new balance would be 50. Then I'm going to return the new balance 50, and that new balance is then going to be assigned here to my checking balance. So I'm going to test it. Let's make sure that it works as expected. I'm not sure why I have this error. Oh, I'm missing this curly brace. So I have this block of code for my if and this block of code for my function. And so now let's test it. All right, I'm going to choose 1 to deposit money in my checking, and the balance in my checking, I'm going to add $200. And so now it's $476.20. I'm going to quit. So now to double check that that balance, I am displaying the balance in the function, but I want to also display it back in the main just to make sure it's working as expected. Again, you can, so I'm going to display it here again. Display in main. And so to do that, I just display it back here. And this way I can make sure, and I always like to give myself a lot of printf statements. All right, displaying the new balance in main. There's nothing wrong with putting extra printf statements. So let's just make sure that it works, and then we'll do withdraw. All right. Add money to my checking, $300. So if I take a look, my balance was updated in the function. My balance is also updated in the main function. All right, so the only last function of course, you need to also do this for the savings, and you don't have to keep all of these extra printfs, but it's a good idea to keep them. It doesn't, nothing wrong with having extra feedback when you're working and you're learning how to program. So the last thing we want to do is do the withdraw part. So I'm just going to copy and paste this from the other function. We're going to have to, of course, do the, you're going to have to add it for the savings. But instead of being an add amount, it's going to be a subtract amount. So we display the balance. We ask how much. We get subtract amount. Then we're only going to subtract it if we have enough. So you're going to say if your account balance is greater than or equal to the subtract amount, that means you have enough in the account, then you can subtract the amount, right? You would take your account and you would subtract the amount. That means that you have enough in your account to cover the balance. And if you, whoops. So that means you have enough to cover the balance. If you do not have enough to cover the balance, you just print a message that says you do not have enough to cover the balance. Okay. There's not enough. There is not enough. Again, you should put a better message than that. So then let's go over this. I have my subtract amount. I display the balance. I ask how much. You can't assume. You can assume a lot of good input, but they might put too much anyway. I get the amount. If there's enough in my balance to cover it, I will subtract it. If there's not enough, I will let them know that there's not enough and I will not subtract it. So you either do this or else you do this. I display the balance again, and now I need to call the function. So I'm going to call the function on option 2. And then I'm going to also display the new balance in main just to make sure that it is working as expected. So let's give it a try. All right, number 2. I selected 2. How much? $700. That's not enough. My balance remained at $276. 2, $20. That is enough, so I was able to deduct it. 1, I can add $700. Now I have $956. I can subtract $800. And if you notice, I'm also printing the balance back in the main, which there's nothing wrong with that. I'm following what's happening and I'm making sure it's working as expected. So you just need to add the features for the savings account and, make the interaction and the user experience a little better than the way that I have it displayed.